Yeah, so my name's John Erdman. I'm a professor emeritus here at University of Illinois, Department of Food Science and Human Nutrition, College of Aces.
All right, great. Well, of course, you guys, hopefully by now it's the second episode. Everyone here knows me. I'm Azuddin. I'm a sustainable design student here at U of I. And we're excited to have you on specifically just like about all of your research about nutrition. And we found it very interesting in terms of, you know, how, again, just like talking about all the details and like things that most people wouldn't really recognize when they're cooking and preparing their food.
Mm-hmm.
So the first thing I wanted to ask you about is we're going to kind of start broad here, is like, what are some like the biggest, I guess, like pivotal moments in like nutritional research or history that you can think of, or like that have motivated you to look more into it?
Well, that's a big, broad question. So for me, I was an undergrad. I started off in chemistry.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted something more applied, and I switched over into food science, which is more of applied science. And I was able to work for a guy named Paul LaChance, who just came from NASA,
Okay.
and as a professor, and he was involved with designing space foods for astronauts.
So like dehydrated stuff?
Yeah.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah. So the first space missions, it was under his guidance and others, of course, in designing space food. So his area of research was physiology, nutrition, biochemistry.
Mm-hmm.
And I was able to get a position as an undergrad in his lab. And that kind of turned me on to the whole nutrition field.
Yeah.
And then a couple years in the Army.
Okay.
And then I came back and I got his PhD with him.
Okay.
And I started working on carotenoids at that time, the health aspects of carotenoids. So we still do some of that work.
So in preparation for this interview, I looked kind of into different cooking methods in terms of like nutritional loss and like preservation of nutrition. And it's interesting that you talk about like astronaut food and like serving time in the Army too. What is like, I'm not sure if, how, to what extent you could speak to this, but like, I'm sure there's a significant amount of nutritional loss when freeze drying foods or like preparing it for astronauts or with like MREs and stuff like that. To what extent, like, is like, because the food has to change forms almost, right? You take it from one state and then turn it into something that can be packed over time.
So
what is the nutritional loss?
The short answer is there's losses and gains.
Okay.
Right. So I also had the opportunity to chair a National Academy of Sciences committee on military nutrition.
Okay.
Because of my military nutrition background, so we actually got well involved with the preparation of MREs and other freeze-dried products for the Army. And yes, if you thermally process foods, whether you're doing it in your home or Campbell Soup does it, you're going to lose some nutrients.
Okay.
Yeah. Particularly water-soluble vitamins. Vitamin C and folic acid and some of these things are destroyed a little bit.
Okay.
On the other hand, there are other things like protein and some of the carbohydrates and carotenoids, which we'll talk about, which become more bioavailable.
Interesting.
Because the heating breaks down the matrix of the food.
Okay.
And allows our digestive enzymes to get in there and release them, and so we can absorb them.
Interesting.
So it's a mixed bag.
Okay. So it can like enhance some things and then devalue other things. Okay.
Right. So in most food manufacturers then would, if you look at the label, they'll know how much of that's retained even on a shelf.
Okay.
And in many other cases, they'll enrich the products to put back in what might be lost. So it's a mixed bag of some things improve and some things are lost a little bit.
Okay, interesting. So, okay, that's because I didn't think that there was going to be some gain. when when you're considering these sorts of things, just you think about how much you might be losing. And so it's interesting to say, like with the food matrix, I'd like you to speak more to that. Like, what is the food matrix, and what does that mean in terms of its implications for just nutrition and how our bodies kind of break down what we eat?
Yeah. Well, let's take carotenoids as an example. So the carotenoids are yellow, orange, and red pigments in our fruits and vegetables.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that we study is lycopene. So lycopene is the red pigment in tomatoes,
mm-hmm.
in tomato products. In the tomato, the raw tomato,
mm-hmm.
which I like to eat,
mm-hmm.
The lycopene is actually in crystal form.
Interesting.
It's
okay.
a linear molecule, it's lined up, and it's very poorly digestible.
Mm-hmm.
So we might only absorb 3 or 4 or 5% of the lycopene. The rest
mm-hmm.
goes through.
Okay.
But when you heat the product, it opens up the matrix a little bit.
Mm.
And if you consume, say you have your salad with some salad dressing, the fat in there
mm-hmm.
helps with the absorption. So instead of, say, 5% absorption, you might get 20 or 25% absorption.
Okay, so there's less of a loss.
Yeah.
So would fat kind of act like a vehicle for like that?
A vehicle for helping in the absorption.
Okay.
But lots of foods are like this. So
mm-hmm.
if you eat raw meat,
mm-hmm.
You're not going to take advantage of all the amino acids, which are the building blocks of protein.
And that's because of the matrix you're talking about. It's not as bioavailable.
It's not as bioavailable, and our enzymes can't get in there and
mm-hmm.
digest it.
Okay.
So some heating is good. Now, if you take your hamburger and throw it on a grill,
mm-hmm.
and the flames are up in there, now you're creating chemical products that weren't there before.
Correct. And that's like caramelization and things
caramelization
like
and oxidation, and you form some pigment. Well, some of these taste really good. That's why people like them.
Yeah.
But now you've lost those nutrient components, and you might even, if you really char the meat, you create carcinogens.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
interesting. Yeah.
So it's a yin and yang here.
Yeah.
Right.
And like you said before, it's like you're introducing some things, and you might be losing other things. And
mm-hmm.
depending on the details, it could be harmful or better for you.
Mm-hmm.
So we're talking about food now. What I'm curious about, now that you're talking about it, is supplements and bioavailability there. So if I have like a multivitamin, like a men's multivitamin, for example, to your understanding, what is the kind of bioavailability there on average, and what kind of are there different supplement preparation methods that give you more bioavailability or anything like that?
Yeah. So your typical one-a-day products
mm-hmm.
that come from big companies,
yeah.
Those are the most bioavailable forms.
Okay.
Because they spent a lot of research to make sure they're bioavailable. They can't afford to have somebody analyze a product and find out it doesn't contain what it contains.
Yeah.
If you buy the generic brands, or somebody makes something in their garage,
mm-hmm.
you have no idea.
Okay, interesting.
So this is where, if you're going to buy a vitamin supplement, buy it from a good company.
Mm-hmm.
And some of these other supplements that have all kinds of claims and stuff in them, you have no idea.
Mm-hmm.
Because FDA, Food and Drug Administration,
mm-hmm.
is prohibited from monitoring supplements unless somebody dies.
Interesting.
Which is not a good outcome, of course.
Yeah.
So there's all kinds of junk that's sold, garlic, and I'm not necessarily picking on garlic, but lots of things, herbal supplements and stuff.
Products, yeah,
there's
crazy
thousands, or you go online, there's all kinds of stuff. In fact, I'd be worried about the stuff online.
Yeah.
Because anybody can make it and sell it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, people always talk about certain things that increase your ATP or will help you live longer, or reduce wrinkles, stuff like that. It's, a lot of it's just BS. Yeah.
Correct.
Okay, interesting. Okay, yeah. So There's also people like with supplementation, people because they're skeptical, like you mentioned, they get the supplements like separately. So like they'll get like a bag of just like magnesium powder, for example, and like something else for iron, something else for zinc, etc. And I know like for magnesium specifically, there's like multiple forms of magnesium. There's like glycinate, there's all the different types. And depending on the outcome, people can kind of pick and choose. I know, to my understanding, like depending on, like I said, the form, some are more bioavailable than others. And why is that? Is it because they're paired with something else? Like I know, like magnesium on its own, and then, like I said, magnesium glycinate. Would you be able to speak to the difference there? Like if it's paired with something, if it's like a vehicle, like you mentioned, like how fats work.
So there's a couple issues here. Taking individual supplements such as magnesium or zinc or calcium or something by themselves at high levels could be a problem.
Okay.
Because many of these minerals use the same transporters to get them into the intestine wall. So, for example, taking too much zinc can block copper because they use the same transporter. So many people need women. A lot of women, particularly, need iron, calcium. Magnesium is very low in the diet. All these things are pretty low in the typical American diet because we don't eat well. Right. But you're almost better off with a multi.
Okay.
Because they know they've balanced them out.
Yeah.
And you know, there's like mixtures of vitamin D and calcium and magnesium, which are pretty good because all of them are kind of doing the same thing. Now, as far as what they're bound to, there are some mineral supplements, the cheap ones, that are very poorly absorbed.
Yeah.
And then other ones have complexed and they are better absorbed, they're more higher bioavailability.
Okay. And what is the difference in bioavailability versus, like, for things that, like there's sometimes people will consume their supplementation through, like, IV drips versus taking them as, like, supplements that you consume, like, through your stomach, things like that. Like, what's the difference there? And then sometimes people use, like, the, like, topical forms of that supplement, too.
Right, and there's some that are inhaled or nasal.
What are the advantages of each kind of thing? Case by case, or how does that work?
Case by case, but you know, I'm trained in nutrition, so eat it, consume it. You know, is certainly the best way.
Okay.
Now, if you've got a medical issue that you can't absorb particular nutrients, or you have poor absorption altogether, then you may have to take something IV. But that should only be obviously under a doctor's guidance.
Yeah, and that's starting to pop up different places where they have like a lot of holistic medicine places that let you kind of just go in and do IV treatment and stuff. There's like people who run marathons after that they just go do like electrolyte IVs and things of this nature. It's interesting how like this kind of like consciousness of health is like producing these types of consumption methods. So
it wouldn't be my choice.
Yeah.
Because you can, after a marathon or whatever you're doing, you can consume.
Just do it by eating or drinking.
Eating and drinking. If you don't have an absorption issue, then eating is probably much cheaper.
Okay, well, I guess to go back to your research a little bit, I don't mean to sensationalize, but the headline is like, tomatoes can prevent cancer, huh? So I guess speak to that for our viewers who don't necessarily know your research. What is it about tomatoes that make it so interesting for health? And then not just tomatoes specifically, but like what did you unearth about the compounds and like the food matrix as you mentioned?
Yeah. So first of all, there's a lot of epidemiological studies looking at associations of different foods with different health outcomes. And there's been many that have looked at a variety of fruits and vegetables and different cancers. In our particular case, we've been most interested in prostate cancer.
Okay.
So prostate cancer is like the number one, or well, probably number 2 or 3 cancer diagnosed in men, older men. most men in their 60s actually have prostate cancer. It's not advanced to a stage that's a problem. They're not going to die from it.
So they just don't know it.
Yeah. But 1 in 6 men will have prostate cancer they have to do something about. Right? So getting back to tomatoes, one of the vegetable fruit products that always comes out epidemiologically associated with lower risk of prostate cancer was tomatoes.
Interesting.
Yeah. So our lab actually did systematic reviews and meta-analysis of many, many studies. And what those show is that persons with higher blood levels of lycopene, again, I mentioned before, lycopene is a red pigment in tomatoes, are associated with lower risk of prostate cancer, particularly aggressive cancer, the type that can kill you.
Okay.
So we started, this is 25, 30 years ago, in association with our collaborators at Ohio State University, looking with various animal models at the potential reduction of cancer growth. So animal models, no animal model is perfect.
Right.
So we have used many. We've used rats and mice. We've used transplantable tumors. We've done transgenic mice.
Interesting.
And as transgenic mice, 100% of those mice are going to get prostate cancer.
What's the difference between a transgenic mouse and a regular mouse?
So some of the genes are altered.
Interesting, okay.
So one of the genes, particularly, it's a p53 gene, we all have in all our cells, and once you get mutations, it kind of blocks the activity of the mutation, roughly. So that gene is essentially missensed or knocked out. So just in the prostate.
Okay.
So these animals are all going to get cancer.
Because you've prevented their ability to kind of regulate their mutations.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. So we're looking at dietary factors that might slow down the development of cancer. After all, if it's an indolent cancer and never progresses, fine. You'll die of something else. Right? So we looked at broccoli, we looked at soy, and particularly tomato, and some combinations. So first we got tomato paste from the store, got a big lot of tomato paste. We freeze dried it. What that means is essentially take all the moisture out, made powder, mix that in with the animal diets.
Interesting.
And in several different models, the cancer growth was diminished substantially.
Okay.
So, of course, that's question one. Okay, then what's in tomatoes?
Yeah.
So we're able to get lycopene, purified lycopene, and we add that to the diet. And in most of the models, the lycopene also lowered the risk of growth of the tumors. Okay. So we think therefore, lycopene is one of the components of tomato.
Interesting. Okay. And I guess about the testing too, why, and this is, I guess, like a more broad question, not necessarily for the research itself, but when testing things with animals, why is it that I always see like just usually mice and rats? Is it their physiology similar to humans, or what's really like?
No, very good question. Their physiology really isn't that close. We use mice particularly because we have all these transgenic animals. We can knock out or enhance enzymes, or
you can be really specific about
what
variables.
You can really dial in on mechanisms.
Interesting.
So our lab's done work with other species that are better absorber of carotenoids, but they don't get prostate cancer, for example. So we have to use models that produce the cancer we're interested in.
You can like reliably replicate.
Right,
too.
and so as I mentioned before, we've looked at many models. So if we only look at one and we say, oh, gee, that looks like it works, I'm not convinced personally. I want to see it in several models. And that's why I have far more confidence now, because we've done it in several models, not just one.
Okay, interesting. Okay, great. So, yeah, that's always a question. That's always a question I've had with animal testing, because I always, like I said, hear about like these sorts of just different animals being used. I know lobsters are used in research in some cases for hormonal research, because some of the receptors in their brains act similarly to humans. So yeah, I was always curious about something like that. Okay, so again, to kind of go back to your story, I guess, with tomatoes, what is it that kind of got you, just I guess specifically on tomatoes? Like what was the thing that made that the area of study? Sorry, this thing is like, I realize I'm a little bit out of frame here. Make sure that's good.
Yeah, so this is kind of a building relationships story. So mention collaborators at Ohio State University. So a fellow's name is Steve Clinton. So Steve Clinton came to U of I, did his MD and his PhD. And then he went to did an oncology fellowship, I think at University of Chicago, blah, blah, blah. And then he went to Harvard. He worked at Harvard for a number of years. And he called me up one day, and we had been friends. He said, I know you really have good animal models here. We need to work on tomatoes and prostate cancer.
Okay.
I said, why is that? I said, well, I know that a big paper is coming at it from Harvard showing the association of tomatoes, of all the fruits and vegetables, with lower risk of cancer. So that's going to be coming out in a few months.
Okay.
So he knew that because it was people that he talked to at Harvard.
So he just kind of tipped you off, told you.
Yeah, right. He said, let's work together. So we wrote a grant to NIH, National Institute of Health.
Yeah.
And we got ahead of the curve, so to speak.
Okay.
So we got in early. So collaborations. The University of Illinois is really good at this. You know, people working together, cross disciplines.
Yeah.
And so that's how we got into the area.
Awesome.
Yeah.
You have to forgive me. I have to make one more adjustments on the camera. I told you we got a jank setup over here. Man. Yeah, just doing some weird things. It's got my head at the moment. Okay. I think this is the last adjustment, no problem.
Yeah.
But okay, like I said, with tomatoes, it's very interesting too, because it's not something that's usually considered as something that's like gonna be super, like something that contributes a ton to your health. And to my understanding too, because of its kind of acidic properties, it's in other cases it's seen as something that's inflammatory or something that may be, you know, causing problems for people. I never would have considered that it could have these potentially like just helpful benefits, especially in terms of cancer. And that's all because of what you're saying with the compounds that are within it, and then it's also dependent on what you're pairing it with, correct, and the way that it's prepared. So could you speak a little bit more to that with food preparation, as well as what you pair your foods with? How can we unlock more nutrients out of our foods?
Yeah. So variety is always a good thing. So I mentioned before we've done work with broccoli. We've done work with soy. Broccoli has a number of other the sulfur type compounds that are really important. Soy has isoflavones, which are important, particularly with breast cancer. So consuming a large variety of fruits and vegetables is really a good thing. There's so many thousands of these molecules. They're not vitamins. They're not essential.
Okay.
But they can impact our metabolism in a positive way. Many are antioxidants, which we need. Many are have not been studied, but we know, again, with associations, that consumption of more plant-based foods is related to better health and cancer, heart disease, diabetes, you name it.
So having even like non-essential, like just by having this variety and having these non-essential nutrients, you're just increasing your health outcomes altogether, correct? You're just
Absolutely.
benefiting all of them.
Yeah.
Okay. And so, given your background in dieting and nutrition, if you were to create the perfect diet for just longevity and like best lifestyle and health, what would you eat? And maybe you already probably implement these in your life, but if you were to create just the perfect diet,
Yeah.
what do you think it would include?
So one of the simple recommendations from the American Institute for Cancer Research, so this is a private foundation, they fund research, we've gotten grants from them, and so it's all donations. They say that 2/3 of your plate should be plant-based.
Interesting.
2/3.
And why is that?
Because this is where all the bioactives come from. My wife and I, we eat almost anything, but I can assure you, probably we're around the 2/3 of the plate. Red meat, and I eat red meat, but maybe once or twice a week, compared to probably many people. Red meat's associated with some negative outcomes.
Really?
Right?
Okay.
Right. So if you have mostly grains-based and vegetable-based on your plate, that's a simple way of better assuring that you're going to have consumption of the right kinds of foods. The other one is have multiple colors on your plate.
Okay, yeah, I've heard this one before.
Yeah, so it just makes sense. Meat is red, poultry, fish, and white. Get some other colors in there.
Yeah,
right. Right.
Okay.
So these are simple things, and we do a lot of stir fries at home.
That's nice. Yeah.
And
I
sometimes
that's
it's
also a good way to like preserve the nutrients in there too, because it's a fast way of cooking. It's not too hot.
Yep.
So therefore, you maintain a lot of the good nutrients.
Absolutely. So a quick cooking, either a wok or in a fry pan, and it's never the same. It depends what we have in the refrigerator, right?
Right. You can just kind of throw things together; it'll taste good.
Or maybe the stuff, if we go out to dinner and we bring food back usually, and it goes in, the next day into the stir fry, and then sometimes there's meat or poultry or sometimes soy or just vegetables in there. So
makes sense. Yeah.
So it's simple, easy to cook.
So to what extent is this? Is just like diet in general for just maximizing, like I said, lifestyle and best nutrition for longevity? To what extent is that a case by case versus like one size fits all issue? Because like depending on someone's like activity levels, or if someone's like lifting heavy weights, or if they're like Olympic swimmer or whatever it may be, how to what extent should this kind of diet change? And I know maybe like some variables kind of like more protein, maybe some less fat depending on what you're doing. But like I'm speaking, I guess, more to those who like swear by these kinds of like paleo diets or like carnivore diets that just kind of eat mostly meat, and then maybe we'll involve some avocados or berries or something like that here and there.
Well, people can make personal choices, right? I think there are downsides. So a paleo diet, where are you getting your vitamins from, right? Where are you getting vitamin C? For example, ketogenic diets, which are reasonably popular, you're altering your metabolism. You're forcing the brain to not use glucose for energy.
Yeah.
And you're forcing it to use ketones. Well, that's not normal. Right? Now, there are certain metabolic situations where that's a positive thing, but that's beside the point. That's not the normal person.
So it kind of throws you off balance, you're saying? Might not necessarily be the best.
So is that a good thing? I don't know. Relying on a few handful of foods, I don't think it's a good idea.
Well, what about for those who say that because there's people who have like the all meat diets, right? But they'll supplement the rest of their like missing vitamins. Do you think that's like?
Well, where are they getting their bioactives from then?
Okay.
Right?
So
They're only getting. They're only okay. You could take
missing
all meat and then take a vitamin pill, but then
Yeah.
where you're getting all these other compounds.
Mm-hmm. And I guess to the other side of things, the things like the vegan diet and stuff like that. Would you say? I guess if you were to compare both of them to your eyes, like a fully carnivore versus a fully vegan diet, what do you think would be better just for longevity, or like just health and lifestyle?
Well, I'm guessing because I haven't seen any data that vegan's better,
Okay.
but I don't know that I've ever seen any actually direct comparisons.
Interesting.
But vegans have to be, and vegetarians, they've got to be very careful to get particularly the right amount of mixture of proteins and such. And irons can be an issue.
Yeah.
B12 can be an issue. So there can be issues, but
There's trade-offs either way.
yeah.
Yeah.
But a lot of vegetarians really have studied nutrition, and they know that they have to match, say, grains with soy or something like that in order to optimize their amino acid profiles.
Okay.
So if you're going to pursue that, then you should really read up on it.
Okay, so just be aware of the full profile of nutrients you're consuming and make sure you have a balanced intake.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, because there's always people that like are diehard one way or another, and I feel like that it's just like, okay, there's maybe benefits here, maybe benefits here, but like what's the full picture? And it's interesting that I think the goal is, like you said, just have a balanced intake, make sure you're getting everything you need, and then whichever way that kind of is, just be aware of what you're consuming. So I think that's very important. I think that's something that's very helpful. And I want you to also give us a little bit more detail on bioactive ingredients. So what exactly are these, and how can people just get more of them in general? You mentioned just like eating vegetables and things like that, but
well, most of the bioactives are going to come from grains, grain foods, and from fruits and vegetables, and some of them are hormone-like for the plant compound. Some are actually. So let's take grapes for example. Under harsh conditions, you get more of these tannin-like compounds, bitter type compounds. And that makes a good wine. But they're there because they're protecting the fruit from being eaten.
Yeah.
Right? So they're herbicides, essentially natural herbicides for the fruit.
Yeah.
So some of them are there for their plant metabolism.
Okay.
But some of those, if they're absorbed in the body, are probably very good for our metabolism as well. Yeah. So there are thousands of compounds. Most have never been studied.
Wow, interesting. And so do you feel like this area is well researched and well studied in general? Or do you feel like there's so much more to be done here?
No, much more. It's not funded very well.
Okay.
Yeah. So tea's another example. There are all kinds of these polyphenols in tea. Cocoa, or cacao, has all these flavonoid compounds, and we've been involved with some of the studies. Again, it's in collaboration with Harvard, showing much increased blood flow with these flavonoid compounds, and there are thousands of them.
And it's said to also prevent cancer too, no?
Some of them might as well in cancer. Yeah.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
And I guess we're talking a lot about like these kinds of like specific ingredients, specific nutrients, and again, not to sensationalize things again, but is there like a silver bullet that you've identified? What's like the one superfood that everybody needs to consume that's good, that's going to be, you know, is there something that you really found was like...
No, I don't. So typical magazines, you walk in a doctor's office and they're sitting there and they say, the top superfoods,
yeah,
right?
Right.
And it changes every year.
Right, yeah. Avocados, it seems to
Avocados,
be usually,
blueberries,
yeah.
Carrot,
Right.
It's just...
just get all of it, it's all good. Right?
Yeah, right.
Okay, yeah, because what I'm starting to get, like, the more that we kind of talk to experts in these fields and the more that we kind of just get more information, learn about it, it's never usually this, like, kind of, like I said, just silver bullet magical solution. It's exactly as you've been talking about, just balance, just being aware of what you're eating and knowing that you're getting a full profile of all the things that you need. And to what extent do people's needs differ? Like, if I'm going on a website and I'm learning about, like, of course, like, let's say a reputable website, but if I'm going somewhere and I'm learning, okay, this is the types of nutrition I should be getting, how do I tailor that to my needs? And how do I know specifically, like, I'm lacking this or I need to gain in this?
We're still learning about that. So Dr. Sharon Donovan from our campus is director of a personalized nutrition for health initiative, which is a cross-campus program. And I think nutritionists have been moving in the direction of personalized nutrition, which is what you're asking. But we have so much more to learn.
Mm-hmm.
So what are the indicators that suggest you need more, say, vitamin A than I do?
Right.
Or more protein? Because we vary. You know, each of us are different.
Yeah.
You know, I have an identical twin brother, but still, he and I still differ.
Okay, interesting.
So we just have such a long way to go to be able to say, all right, I'm going to take a blood sample from you, and here's something you have to do that's unique. Now, people are selling these things already, but how much do they really know? Not enough, in my opinion.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, it's there's all this stuff is like becoming extremely popular, especially in the last like 5 years or so. Yeah. And especially with COVID, people are starting to really like trying to understand what can I do to improve my health. How can I like remain like I said, longevity, good lifestyle, but also stay protected from things like COVID-19. And you know, there's all these crazy people like on social media. Like I don't know if you've heard of this guy. I'm forgetting his name, but he's trying to reverse his biological age. So he's like taking blood samples from his like son, who's younger than him, so that he can kind of like match some of the properties there. He's doing all these like he like counts every single calorie, like every 1 calorie, and then takes supplementation for everything. And then with alcohol, he doesn't drink alcohol. He takes like a supplement version of it, so he doesn't get like he minimizes the downside of it. Crazy stuff like that. To what extent do you see this as something valuable, and to what extent, I guess, how far should people really go for this sort of thing? Should they just be eating right, or should they really like get into the weeds of what?
This guy obviously has a type A personality, and he's probably going to have a shortened lifespan because of anxiety.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, he's rich. He's just kind of dumping money on it. He's just documenting it so people can see. It's really interesting, but it seems just crazy too, you know?
Yeah, it is crazy. It's much, and we haven't talked about it, but exercise has to parallel nutrition. It's obesity is, no pun intended, huge problem. You know, we got 2/3 of older Americans are overweight or obese. If they take a bunch of supplements, I'm not sure they're going to help themselves. What they need to do is not be obese, right? And which is easier said than done, of course. So portion size is critical, and exercise is critical.
Okay.
Sitting on your couch at home eating Doritos is not an answer to life, right?
Of course, yeah.
So I think portion size is probably one of our biggest issues facing Americans. So we expect when we go into a restaurant to have a large portion.
Yeah, of course. You're getting your value.
Well, over time, you're gonna gain weight, and that's going to be really negative as far as longevity.
So even if I'm eating a ton of quote unquote healthy foods, it's still I just need to be careful of what I'm like the extent to which I consume.
The amounts.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I think like I said, it's been great just understanding how it's all about balance. It's all about just maintaining again awareness and balance and knowing all of these things, and then of course matching that with good lifestyle choices like exercise, good sleep, and then the diet will also come with that. So everything that's been kind of sold to us is like very complex. The more that you learn about it, just seems like very straightforward. Like I said, just be aware of what you're eating and then eat what's better for you, and then match that with good lifestyle practices. You'll live a good life. That's what it seems like.
It's kind of the way I live. So
yeah. Okay, interesting. All right. Well, I appreciate that. I think that's all the questions I've got for you. Is there anything else that you'd like to kind of close on? A message to anybody watching?
Well, I would say make sure your plate looks like I said 2/3 of your plate, and it shouldn't be the biggest plate that you can find either.
Right.
Reasonable size with your grain-based product and your fruits and vegetables or your tuber, and then moderate amounts of meat and dairy.
Okay. And just as a personal question, what's your favorite type of meal? Like, what's your favorite dish?
Wow, that's a good one.
Does it have tomatoes?
Actually, my favorite, I really love salmon. We have salmon at least once a week, and then we'll have either something on the side, stir fries, and that may have tomatoes in it.
Of course.
And, we grow tomato. In fact, we still have, and here it is in mid-December, right?
Wow.
We still have some green tomatoes that are ripening.
Oh, awesome.
From the garden, so I'm still eating those. Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah. Tomatoes pair very well with salmon. Yeah, I love salmon too.
Yeah.
All right, well, great. I really appreciate your time. Thank you very much for coming.
Yeah, sure.
Great meeting you, Doctor.
Yeah.